Hi guys, my name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain. Welcome to the next Houdini Practice Hour bonus lesson. This time we want to talk about UDIMs. Now with the release of Substance Painter 2020, suddenly everyone is interested in UDIMs. Before it was more a topic for visual effects guys like me, and I thought it would be an interesting thing now to talk about UDIMs, what they are, how they work inside of Houdini, and how you can use the UDIM functionality in Substance Painter 2020 now to generate UDIM textures. And then we come back into Houdini here and render the whole stuff. If you want to know more about VFX workflows, UDIMs, and also applications like, for example, Mari or Nuke, you can find some tutorials on my YouTube channel. Also, I have a publication about the Houdini fundamentals in English. And if you have more questions, write in the comments, or you can also write me an email. I'm a trainer since 20 years for VFX workflows, and I'm really happy to help you. Okay, let's get started. What are UDIMs? For this, I've generated here the same scene like we had before. I renamed it here for our Gumroad project, UDIM workflow. And now I dive into the whole network. And you remember that we had in the last bonus lesson here this UV layout node, which I bypassed. The reason for this was I wanted to stack all the UV islands in the UV standard space. Let's talk about that briefly. I go first here to the lid, and then I press spacebar 5 to show you here the UVs for this here. And if you take a look here, this rectangle here is the so named standard UV space. It has a coordinate system, which is U in this direction and V in this direction, and it starts here with 0 for both axes and goes from 0 to 1 and 0 to 1. And in the classic workflow, you always have to place everything, all your UVs inside of this coordinate system, so that you can load a texture here into this space, and every pixel which is under a polygon here is then placed on the surface. A really easy concept. The problem with this here comes if you have a really complex object. So if we now merge these two together, let's go here to the merge node, you now have the problem that we have much more islands for our cup, and they are overlapping, which means we run into a problem if we want to use only one material for the whole cup, because now the texture which we load in here will use the same space, and we get here doubles, and this is a problem. It isn't a problem if you take more than one material. So I took here in the classic workflow, this was the lesson before that, so you can take a look here, 5 materials. And these materials were generated with the help of groups. So we had the lid, and we had, for example, the paper around the whole thing. Let's search here for the right one, which is paper outside is number 3 here. And if you know later that you have more than one material, you can place your UVs in the same standard space, because you know, okay, this paper outside material, which you then take a texture here and place it behind it, will never show the same texture like, for example, these islands here, the lid, because it's a different material. And this was the classic way we started. We said, okay, we make UVs depending on materials. What you also have to keep in mind is that normally materials will tile. That means it brings the same texture again and again. And that means also if you place, for example, now something like that here, I remove now the bypass, side by side, it looks better, but under the hood, it is the same problem here. So it's only tiling. So if you have a material which has this island and this here in the same, it still overlaps because they are placed on each other because it's only a tiling thing. So this was the classic world. But now the clever guys at Weta invented a really interesting system which is named UDIMs. And the idea behind this is it's an enhancement of the standard UVs. What it does is it has an offset rule built in. So we now can use more than one of these islands at the same time. So the standard UV space here is the starting point, and then we can use tiles to the right and to the top. And every of these tiles gets a number. I have made a screenshot here from the Foundry guys in the documentation, and I thought this is a nice screenshot here to show. So this here is the standard UV space between 0 and 1, you see it here. And the name for this standard space in the UDIM world is 1001, so the first tile. And now you see, if you now go to the right, you see this here counts up. It's still 10, 02, 03, and so on. And it goes until 1010. So this is the last tile you can have in the U direction. And if you need more tiles, you go to the top here, and now you see this is then 1011 and so on, and this goes then to 1020, and then you have here 1021 and so on. And in the standard, there's a limitation here to the right, because you only have 10 tiles in the U. But here in the vertical direction, you can have as many tiles if you like. And this technique now depends on this UDIM number. And what we do later in the material, when we load the texture, we use this coordinate, this number, to load the right texture. And so you can now use a whole bunch of these tiles. You will see that in practice in a moment. And if you go into VFX production and you have an asset, for example, a transformer or a creature from Avatar and so on, you normally make your texture painting in Mari, because Mari was an in-house tool at the time of Avatar at Veta, and it's really built around the idea of UDIMs. So it's the classic UDIM tool, and I use it for really VFX painting. UDIMs are the standard at this point. And now it comes to the more generalist's workflow and also now into Substance Painter. So I hope you understand a little bit about this technique, and now we want to use it. One last point here for this here. If you are a clever texture artist, you normally also use these rows. If you make a transformer, for example, you start to split your stuff, because it's really easy in applications like Mari to select all the mesh parts which are in a UDIM tile and say hide everything else. So you really can concentrate on a tile. And so you maybe place all the legs here in one row, and then for the face you have a row, and then you have for the feet a row, and so on. So you will see in professional texturing there are good ideas how to lay them out, and I think you will find some really good tutorials about that on YouTube. Let's switch over here now, and what I've did is I've reactivated now our UV layout node here again, and to move now to make this offset so that this island moves over, we used in our UV layout node here the targets, and I switched the target to UVDIM tiles, and I said I want to place everything which comes in here in the tile 1002, and that was the reason why it moved to the right side. To make it a little bit more interesting, I also want now to have another UDIM tile, and it was a question in the comments from the UV section of the lesson, where someone asks, okay, how do I play this more? For example, if I have here the couplet and I want to split it here. So let's do that here for a moment. I delete this node, it's not important anymore. So we go now here, and what I want is I want to place this island here, because for me it's really important, to a next tile. The idea behind this is, if you think a tile is a texture which has a fixed size, for example 2K, 4K, 8K, the resolution is fixed. And if you have an island which is really small here, you only get a part here of the whole resolution. If you have a part which is later used in a close-up, for example, you have a big creature and you lay it out, and then you say, yeah, but on the right foot I have later a close-up of that. I need much more resolution there. What you can do through this UDIM idea is I place the right foot on its own UDIM, and so I have the big advantage that I use the whole resolution of the tile. So you place really often your islands with the intention of resolution. Let's do that here as an example. This top lid here I want to have here in this tile. So what I do here is I add another UV layout node here, place it, and you see everything goes back to the left. Why? Because this UV layout node takes now everything which comes in here because the group field is empty, and layouts it. And normally this node layouts everything into the standard UV space, which is okay. So we now go here to the targets. I say I want to place it in a UDIM tile. I activate this, and I want to place it, for example, in 1003. Now you see it's placed here, but everything which came from the stream here is now placed. So I only want to have this area here. And so we have to find how we can separate that. I know that I made a group when I unwrapped this here. It was lit top UV island, for example. But if you want to find out what it is, you can switch here to your 3D view. I go here to the UV layout, get rid here of that. Then you go here to the select tool, press the 9 key to get all the groups. And if you now look around here, you see, this here, the lit flat areas here is this area, and the lit top UV island is this area. And this is the area which I want to place on its own UV space. So top UV island is the number. So I go now here. I press spacebar 5 to go now back here. You see here the selection. And now I say only move the top UV islands over. Now I can press the 9 key to get rid of that and go back to the camera. Okay. Now you see how it looks. Now we moved this part here over in the third one. This is in the second one. And now we combine everything with the merge. And now we have 3 tiles here lying around. So that was the preparation. Then we added here our materials. And you will see a lot of tutorials where you only need one material for the whole thing, because now through Painter, it's really easy to mix different kind metals and dielectrics in one thing. But I find it more useful for teaching purposes to also have more than one material. Because if you, for example, have a glass object and a metal and a plastic and then something with subsurface scattering, you need different shaders for that. So we use here UVs and more than one material here. So we take here the materials, which we have done here, and then we go to our ROPs here. And what we now have to do is we have to save here the FBX out. So we name this cup underscore UDIM, and then we make everything with underscore, low poly. Okay, and then it's from Houdini. We save that out. Fine, then we go to the high poly version. Again, underscore UDIM underscore high poly this time. Save this out. And now we can set the render flag back here to complete. Go back here and leave that. Select the cup, spacebar F. And now we can leave Houdini for a while. So let's go over to Painter. Okay, this is the new Painter version 2020. And what we now do is we go here to File, New, and make a new project. First thing we have to decide is which kind of project we want to have. Metallic roughness, that's okay. Then we load now our files from our project here, and now I have to take a look here what we have saved out. I think it was that here with all the underscores, so hopefully. Let's take a look here. This is 15, that's not right. Yeah, that's the right one. You see 5 o'clock. This is the low poly version of the FBX. I load this. Then we want to have 2K, OpenGL, and now we go into the UDIM settings. And these are now new. You see, if you want to use UDIMs, you have to activate this here. It is on by default, and then you have a selection here. This workflow here is the old workflow before 2020. So it was taking the UDIMs and then it made texture sets out of that. And normally Substance Painter generates its texture sets from the materials which you have assigned. In our case, we have 5 materials. And I want to have these materials later. So if I use this workflow here, the legacy one, I will lose my materials. And this is the thing I don't want. So it only works if you have later one material, or you have to split everything by yourself. So what I do is I take this newest workflow. I want to have UV tiles, and I want to have UV tiles per material. That's exactly what I want. And now we click OK. And now we wait until everything is loaded. And now I will rearrange a little bit the user interface so that it's easier to explain what you see. The first thing we need is the UV texture list here. So take the UV texture list and I drag it out and I move it here to the left so that we see the whole thing here. And what I also want to have is the texture set settings, which I move here down at this point here. So now it's a little bit easier for me to work with. And what I do now here is I take here now the texture list and we analyze what we are seeing here. These are our texture sets, and you see these are our materials. So cup lid, cup paper bottom, cup paper inside, outside, and ridge. These are my materials. And this is important that I have it because here I can, for example, look into the shaders, and Substance Painter is, for example, able to work with different shaders for different purposes. For example, if you have a surface which is translucent or something like that, you can use a different shader. So it's the same like in Houdini later, you have different shaders for the materials. That was the reason why I wanted to have more than one material on it. So these are our materials. And then you see under the lid, this is the one which we split it. So I select this, you see you can click them here. And then you see here, I split it here my view to 2D and 3D. You see here the UV standard space. And now you know what these numbers are. If you don't see the numbers here, you can click them to see them. And these are the UV spaces, which I told you. Okay, so if you now click here, you see where this texture set is placed. And the only texture set which has two UV tiles in use is our lid. So if you select the lid, you see it's in 1002 and 1003. This was the split we've done before. So if you want to see now the different tiles, you can select them here. And now comes another cool feature. Every of these tiles will later be a texture which you load into your material. And you remember the foot of our creature, which you later want to use in a close-up. You say, okay, I've splitted everything and I want to use only, for example, 2K or 4K maps. But this foot will be on a cinema screen and you need this in 8K. And you see this is possible. So if you select here a tile, you can switch here now the resolution. You see still the limitation of Substance Painter that you have a limitation of 4K here in the texture set. In the export, you can then upres it. It's procedural without a loss. We talked about this a lot. So default means it takes the settings which we have done before in the texture set. And the texture set here, if you select now here, in the texture settings, you see everything is 2K at the moment. Okay, I hope this helps you a little bit to understand what's going on here from the layout. Now, what can we do and how can we now work with? I do now the same workflow like I've done in the bonus lesson before, in the classic workflow. So if you're not sure how Substance Painter works, take a look there. And we do now the same texturing here. So first I save. Let's get started here. This here will be the UDIMs workflow, CoffeeCup UDIMs 2020, that's it. And if you wonder, you can have these files here complete for your own purpose. I will place them on my Gumroad and you can give a really small fee for that. And then you have all the Houdini files and also these files here for your studies. So you support with that this channel and my work, and you say a little thank you with that. Okay, now next step is I want to place now my first materials. So I go here to the cup lid and I need a plastic here. So let's go here to the materials and I say I want to have a plastic. And you see here this plastic is really cool. And now comes a really interesting point. If you take this plastic and you have a different texture set here selected, for example, the paper outside, it's no problem for you to drag here and place here on every mesh without any problem. You see, it would work. So I'm still on paper outside, but I can drag here and place it here, for example, on the lid. And you see it's textured. So I removed that. But what doesn't work is, look here, I'm on the cup lid here and there's a paint layer. This is the new symbol here for a paint layer, which I normally can use. Let's take a paint tool here to paint something here on it. But what happens a lot, and this is important, people forget that you only can paint or project on texture sets which they have selected. So if you are by accident still on paper outside and now you try to paint here, you see it doesn't work. Normally this texture set list is collapsed here somewhere in the sidebar, and that is the reason why I have it open while I'm painting a lot, because I have to switch here a lot and I want to see what's going on. So if you ever have the feeling that you can't paint or can't project, make sure that you're on the right texture set. So dragging always works, but not painting or projecting. Okay, now let's take the plastic here again. I remove this layer here, and now we go into the plastic. And what I do is I activate everything here. You know that I really like to set all the values in every channel first, so that I don't later have accidents. And then I go in here into the base color. And now we change here the color a little bit, something more greenish, maybe something like that. And we can make it darker. Yeah, nice. And then the next step would be roughness. And let's get rid here now for a moment here of the UVs. Shift right mouse button. We can rotate here and you see this is really reflective. So I go here into the roughness and make it a little bit more rough. Yeah, nice. Then the next thing we then need is paper. And you will see that we don't have paper. So I import here some resources from my Houdini files. I add a resource here, which is, if I go here in my Houdini project into the external files folder, we can go here into substances. I downloaded a cardboard paper from substance source. So this is the archive. I import that. And later I need the logo. So add another resource. I go one folder up. And here is the logo, which I want to use. It's a PNG. So also load that. Then we have to tell now these two what we want to do with them. So for the cardboard paper, we say this is a base material and the logo here will later be a texture. And then we import the whole thing into our project, not only for the current session, and takes a while. And then we have imported these two here into our system. And now we can take our cardboard here, place it here, and I get rid of this layer here, and inside of this cardboard I can now start, for example, to change a little bit the colors. Then I see that it's too big, so I go into the scale. Like I've said, I've done the same thing before. Press the tab key again, sorry, so enter. And yeah, then we can have also some fibers here. So looks good for me. Yeah, then we also want to have a little bit of reflection here, so lower the roughness and test this. I think it's, yeah, okay, something like that here. Then we also need paper here, so cardboard paper for the bottom part here. Again, scale 3, so that the paper looks everywhere the same. And then we go into the color and maybe make it darker. Yeah. This is the inside. Here we are. I want to have it really bright and really reflective, because I think that it looks then more like a coated material. To get rid here of the lid, I can use my texture set list here. So you can click here to the lid to remove it, or you also can go in here on the paper inside and hold down the Alt key or Option key. And if you click here the eye, it's the same like in Photoshop. Then you see only this here. So it's a solo mode. And I think I like that. So I hold down my left mouse button and drag over all the eyes to get everything back. Yeah, that's the way of painting. Like I've said, you can see my introduction to Substance Painter in the Toothbrush project. I've done a whole introduction to Painter, and in the bonus lesson before that here, we've made here the textures for this cup. So I close here with the logo. So I go here now through the list, and what we want to do is we select the paper outside here. Here it is. Then we go into auto view so that we can project without perspective. I hold down the shift key to snap here my view, place that. Then we take now, if we are here now on the right texture set, paper outside, we make a layer here, a paint layer, because now we want to paint. I name it logo. Then we can take the project tool here. And here inside of this projection, I go into the project settings. I take now our logo. Here it is. You can now decide what you want to project here, but we only want to project color. And then with the S key, stencil, like before. If you hold down the S key, here's a little agenda. I zoom now this thing a little bit smaller. And if something goes wrong, you can reset here your stencil and do it again, because what I want to do, and again, what I want to do here is I only want to scale it here so that it's still nice here in the middle. And then I move here my cup until I see exactly what I want. Then this here is placed. Layer is there, name it logo. Then we go here to the alpha. I removed the alpha because I want to paint everything here. And yeah, then we can start painting the logo on the surface. Great. Yeah, and now the whole thing goes on like that. So let's talk about exporting the whole thing. If we take a look again into the UV space, you now see that here on every of these areas here we have now our paint. You also can work in these here. It's really cool. And what's also possible, and this was the most important thing for most people for this release, I think it's really good to show. If you go here to the lid, you see that this lid here are two UDIMs, and it was not possible in the version before to paint over to UDIMs because you had texture sets. And if you now go here, I make a paint layer here really quick to show you that. I select here my brush and I go here and make, for example, something red. You now can paint between these here without any problems. So this is also a really nice function, thanks to the algorithmic guys, that this here is now possible. Okay, let's get rid of that. And now we can export. So let's go here to File, Export Textures. And you see that this export dialog looks a little bit different here. And I see here that my name is strange. So I have to take a look here so that I don't miss that here. Okay, couplet should be the name which I want. So let's cancel that and I make a double click here. And let's test if we can change that. Yeah, so it's couplet again. Otherwise, we can fix that later. But yeah, I think that's good. And what we now do is we go here to the export. Go here, select the folder where we want to place everything, which is in our project, under texture. And then we make here a new folder, substance. _ UDIMs _ 2020. So you know what this here is. I go now here to OK. Now the next thing you have to keep in mind is that you need an output template. And to be sure that it really does what it should, so UDIMs and so on, I go into that here and I select now the right output, which is here PBR metallic roughness. I found in my tests that sometimes the UDIM numbers didn't come through, but they came through if I reassigned here the right output template, which is PBR metallic roughness. Okay. Then we can change the file type. For VFX, we normally work with EXRs, but for our test purposes, PNG 8-bit is absolutely okay. The size here is based on the texture set sizes, but you also can change them here. And you remember that you can change them here also on the tiles if you like that. Then we have here now what we want to export, in our case all these texture sets. Really nice that you can activate and deactivate some, and in these, if I for example now select the lid, you also can tell here now which tile you want to export. This is important if you only have to paint one tile and you don't want to have everything back. It takes a while, so this helps you a lot in bigger projects. So everything is done. I hope this is fine. Then we have here a new list of exports, so you can see all the jobs which are now queued up, and you also can check. And really important is now, if you take now a look into the naming convention here, and this is your check which you can do, is you now see the couplet underscore base color. So this is the channel where we later want to place it in PBR material, principal shader. And then after the dot here, we have the number. And this is the number of the UDIM where this texture is later placed. And this is a variable, so if you want to dive deeper into that, here you see all these templates, and you see there's a new variable $UDIM in small letters which generates that. So let's export and then open our folder here to check if everything went okay. And now you see, yeah, now we have all these here in our folder. Now we can close this window here. I save that. And now I go back to Houdini again. And now we can place our materials. So let's dive into our mantra materials. And I don't do now all of them because I think it's a little bit boring to see me doing that. So I start here with the couplet. And I make a copy of that, or let's do it by hand so that you remember something. So let's say this is cup, lid, and to see that this is the UDIM variant, I name it couplet UDIM. And then we want to do the same with the paper outside. So we make cup paper outside underscore UDIM. So let's assign them really quick. Go out here, go here to the mantra materials. We go here to the lid material, and what I want now is I want to use the UDIM variant of that. And under 3 we had the paper outside material, and I switch this now to the UDIM material. Everything here vanished, so these textures are not set. So now we can start filling them with life. Let's go into our render cam and make a really fast render to see what's going on. Okay, like expected, it's empty, but you see one problem which I've talked about in the lessons is that this lid here is black. So we have to do the same preparations like we've done before. So great, let's start here with the lid. I select now my principal shader, and you learned from me that you always go, before you add textures here into the principal shader, first thing, base color 111, because this is a multiplier. Then I don't want to use the point color. That's the reason why it's black. Then we go to the roughness, set it to 1 because we want to use a texture, and this is the multiplier. Then we go to metallic, set it to 1 because this is the multiplier for the texture. And that's it. Now we go into the bump and normals, start here. We enable this, tangent space is okay, and now we load here our UDIMs textures. Okay, here we are. I deactivate the show sequences. The reason for this is that the UDIM numbers here confuse the system a little bit, and Houdini doesn't show everything here for you. And this is the lid, so we now go here into the lid. Here are the normals for the lid. And you see that here the normals have this number. So let's go here and select one of these. And the cool thing is now you have 2 of them. We have 2 UDIMs used, and we have now 2 of these textures. The renderer, in our case mantra, has to load both, depending on which part of the lid it is rendering. So we take one of these 2. So for example, 1002, place it here. And what we then have to do, and this is a really important step now, otherwise it doesn't work, because it now grabs only this one. So this number here has to be dynamic. It has to be the UDIM which the ray is hitting here on the surface. And to have this variable, we need a percentage sign. Then we make round brackets. And inside of the round bracket, I name it UDIM in capital letters. So not like in Substance Painter, and small one here is the big one. And then I make a small d at the end. So it looks a little bit strange, but that's exactly what we need. So I show it again so that you can see it. Percentage in round brackets UDIM and then a small d. And this here is now the UDIM and it should work. So let's test the rest of this. I go here to textures, base color. We need the same thing here now. So this is the lit base color. Bring it in. And you need the same variable here again. And if you have done this 1 or 2 times, it's really easy. So do that here. And then we need the roughness. And the last one is the metallic. And behind these numbers can be 100 if you need different textures, because you have 100 UDIMs for one object. So this is done. So let's press render and look what happens. Okay, we have no error. Looks good for me. I stop this. And now I do the same for the paper. And I will now make a time remap so that you don't have to see everything. And we see each other in a minute when I have finished that. Okay, I've added here now the textures for the outside and also added the variables here. So let's take a test now here. And you see it works like expected. So this was the introduction. I want to add one last thing here to the list. If you go here into the materials and build your own shader network, so you don't use here these built-in slots. So I deactivate that here for a moment for the paper outside. So if we now render, let's make a render region here. It should not show the logo. Yeah, exactly. And you now work with external nodes. You open this normally up and then you add, for example, a texture node. And you hook up this texture node here into the system. And here we have our mandrel. So you see, we place here now our paper outside base color. Here it is. And then you place here your variable inside of that here. And the really important thing here is that you take here UDIM file name expansion so that the variable here is used correctly. And that's the thing you have to keep in mind if you work with shader networks. That's it for today. I know it's a long bonus lesson, but I thought it's important to talk with you a little bit about UDIMs and so on. So if you have any questions or additions or wishes for later tutorials, please let me know in the comments. I'm really happy to help you. If you want to support me, these files are on Gumroad for a really small fee. I'm happy if you want to be a Patreon, or if you need training, please ask me. And yeah, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, have fun with Houdini. My name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain. Have a nice time. Until next week.